You're staring at the respawn screen, again. Wiped off the map by a player who seems to be locked onto your head before you even round the corner. These players aren't using some hidden meta or cheats, they just have the better system. It's a deliberate and repeatable process that governs every aspect of how they play. They don't just react to the chaos that Battlefield brings. In this video, we're going to deconstruct every aspect of your gameplay and rebuild it piece by piece on a foundation of elite habits. From learning how to utilize the game's movement to gather information or make a quick getaway, to learning how to make the right moves in any situation. So let's quit wasting time and get straight into the video. So before we get into the map awareness and positioning and whatnot, I want to talk about movement. And I know the Battlefield community hates movement, it's one of their biggest pet peeves, it's COD-like, blah blah blah, whatever you want to say, whatever excuses you want to make. But I'm here to tell you that it's not about moving around like a cracked out COD kid. You can actually use movement tactically or evasively and get away with it a majority of the time. So first I want to talk about simple maneuvers like strafing and crouching. So just imagine these dummies right here are enemies, and I just want to pop around real quickly to gather some information. All you really need to do is strafe out, and pay attention to your crosshair. As soon as your crosshair is on the other side of the corner, pop back in. Just quick in and out. You can even throw in a little crouch if an enemy is nearby or they're looking down towards you and you don't want to get taken out immediately. Another thing you can do if, let's say, an enemy is camping around the corner is you can pop in and out really quickly and just take a few pop shots to take them out, while also making sure they don't have a chance to take you out before you take them out. Doing this is pretty situational, and you're not really going to get much use out of it unless you're using lightweight ammo, and it can be pretty hard to implement in your gameplay, but it is something you should keep in mind, because you can easily get away with a quick kill if you're lucky. If you want to do this, it's important to make sure, again, as soon as your reticle crosses around the corner, you take a quick shot, and then lean back in quickly. You could also even throw in a little crouch if you wanted, but it's going to be a bit harder to implement, and if you're shooting at enemies at farther ranges, it's going to be a lot less practical. You're going to miss a lot more shots because of the sway you get when you crouch. And if you're trying to implement strafing and crouching into gunfights in general, it's important to make sure you get the timing right. If you're moving too slow, the enemy isn't going to have that hard of a time hitting you, and if you're moving too fast, you're pretty much going to be standing still, and again, the enemy's not going to have that hard of a time hitting you. Same thing with crouching. If you're going too slow, you might throw them off, but you're going to give them enough time to adjust, and they're going to be able to take you out pretty easily, and they might even get a few headshots off, which will take you out even quicker. You're also going to want to make sure not to crouch too fast, because you're also going to be a pretty easy target to hit. One thing that helps with timing your crouches is to use toggle crouch instead of hold to crouch. If you're trying to crouch spam while using the hold to crouch, you're pretty much not moving at all, and you need to spend more time holding the crouch to go down and back up. So make sure when you're trying to implement these, try to get your timing down. Make sure you're going left or right at a certain timing that's comfortable to you that'll throw off most enemies. And if you even wanted to, if you're strafing, you just throw in a little crouch every once in a while to throw enemies off. Most of the time it'll catch people off guard, it just depends on the situation. And next I want to talk about sliding or jump sliding. You all know what it is, but there's a lot of uses outside of making aggressive maneuvers to take out enemies. So imagine these are enemies right here, and I want to either cross the gap to get into a power position or get behind the enemy, or I'm just trying to gather some quick information to plan out my next move in general. So what you can do is you can jump in and out of the slide just to gather your information, and make sure when you jump you look over so you slide to the direction you were looking when you jumped. If you have trouble getting a good grasp of jumping in and out of a slide, you could easily just slide and then jump out, or you can jump into the slide and gather your information. You could also use these maneuvers to catch enemies off guard if they're camping in corners or they're just sitting around waiting for you to pop out. So imagine there's an enemy sitting around this corner right here. What you're going to want to do is keep your crosshair or your reticle as close to the corner as possible as you're moving around. What you want to do is jump in and slide around, and you can easily catch an enemy off guard and take them out pretty quickly. Now, because of the movement penalties in this game, it is going to be pretty situational, but a majority of the time, if you're in a close-range gunfight, it's going to be pretty easy to take enemies out with these maneuvers. The hardest part is really just learning where to implement these movement techniques. And the last thing I want to talk about before we move on is something a lot of people don't know about. If you see, when I jump up and land, there's a lot of weapon sway, right? Most people think there's not a lot of things you can do to negate this, but I'm here to tell you there actually is. What you need to do to negate these penalties is double crouch right as you land. As you can see when I double crouch right as I land, there's almost no movement penalties. What you're going to want to do to learn this maneuver is get the timing down of when your operator lands. So when you hear the landing, that's when you're going to want to double crouch. So as soon as I land, if you land just before double crouching, you can negate some of the sway penalties because you're crouching with the sway of the weapon. But if you want to get this as best as possible, you're going to want to learn to crouch right as you land. One thing to keep in mind is if you implement this into a jump slide, is that the weapon is going to sway to the left or right depending on which way you're jumping around. So it's best to do this maneuver when you're running straight forward. And again, this is going to be pretty situational, but you're going to be able to get away with it up to around 20 meters most of the time, depending on where you're aiming and how well you can keep your reticle on target as you move. So next, I want to talk about crosshair placement and pre-aiming. One thing I see a lot of people do is they keep their crosshair pointed at the ground, which isn't going to be helpful in most situations. Just imagine there's an enemy running around the corner, but I have my crosshair pointed at the ground. I'm going to need to make a big adjustment to get my reticle pointed at the enemy, but by that time, I'm probably already dead. So what you're going to want to do is keep your reticle pointed around chest or head height as much as possible wherever you're looking. Now this will vary depending on the situation. Let's say you're looking down these stairs. You're going to want to keep your reticle placed around the top of these rails because that's a good area for chest or head height. If an enemy is coming around these corners crouched, you're going to want to aim a little lower around the halfway point of the rail. If you're having trouble getting a reference of where you should be aiming, you could use your teammates since all players are the same size. But let's use these barriers for example. A good area to aim for chest or head height would be just above this barrier right here at the bottom of the sandbags. And if an enemy is coming crouched around the corner, you're going to want to aim just below the barrier. But even if you're aiming at the top right here, expecting people to come running around in a standing position, all you have to do is make a small adjustment to take an enemy out. Let's use these stairs as an example as well. Let's say you're holding this angle and waiting for an enemy to pop out. You're going to want to aim right around the top of these tiles because that's where chest or head height will usually be. And even if an enemy comes crouched around the corner, you're most likely going to be aiming at their head and you can get a pretty quick kill. Now obviously this is going to vary depending on where you are and what the situation is and what map you're playing. So do your best to use your teammates or objects around the map to get a good reference of where you should be aiming. Now let's move on to holding angles. The most important thing to keep in mind is to keep your reticle where you think an enemy is going to pop out. So let's say I'm waiting for an enemy to come around here and I'm holding this corner right here. I'm going to want to keep my reticle just at the edge of the corner and just above this piece of rubble, since that's the area where most people are going to pop out. They're going to want to use this piece of rubble as cover, and I'm going to want to get the best chance I can to take them out before they can use that head glitch as an advantage. And the same thing if I'm looking through windows. If I'm looking through the second story window waiting for enemies, I'm going to want to keep my reticle at the top of this bottom pane right here, or even just above, depending on what the enemy's doing. And if an enemy was coming through this first story window, you're going to want to aim just around the bottom of the middle pane. Now let's say you're running around the map, you're pushing objectives, or you're just looking for enemies, but you don't really know where they are. What you're going to want to get into the habit of is rounding corners with your reticle or your crosshair, and keeping your crosshair as close to the corner as possible as you're rounding it. That way, if you're moving around and you see an enemy at this window, for example, you can take him out pretty quickly because you have your reticle on target as quick as possible. And again, it could be pretty situational depending on what you're doing. If you wanted to look up or down the stairs to make sure an enemy isn't there, you're going to want to find a good reference point to where you should be pre-aiming and round the corner with your reticle and take an enemy out as quick as possible without exposing yourself too much. So let's say you know where an enemy is somewhere in the map and you want to get the drop on them. What you're going to want to do is place your crosshair to where you think they'll be before you round the corner. That way, as soon as you round the corner, you can take them out as quick as possible before they even get the chance to take you out. And with all this in mind, let's use this little area as an example. Let's say you want to take a quick peek in and out to gather some information to see where people are. You want to use the bottom of these wires as a reference for the windows, and you want to use these little chips in the corner of the wall as a reference for the door. Finally, let's talk about map awareness and positioning. The most important thing you should be doing is using your overhead map or your mini-map as much as possible to gather information on friendly or enemy routes or positions. Obviously, your minimap is only going to give you information for a small area, but if you wanted to get a bigger view of what's going on, you're going to want to use your overhead map, because you can see pings from anywhere in the map. So let's say I've captured this middle objective right here, and I want to know where enemies are coming from next. If they have this objective right here on escalation, or this objective over here on conquest, I'm going to be able to see their pings as they move along to take out my teammates. And usually they like to move around this street right here, or through this alleyway right here, or they'll even push around to use this alleyway right here to get a flank on my teammates. So with that in mind, you can take a look at the overhead map, see what they're doing, and plan accordingly. The next thing we're going to talk about is using cover as much as possible. I see a lot of people just running out in the open and getting themselves killed back to back to back to back. And it's something you should not be doing if you want to win the game. Now, in some areas, it's pretty inevitable, like this road right here. There's not a lot of cover you can take. And if there's an enemy looking at you from the cars over here, or they're behind those little fence posts, you're not going to have the easiest time getting in cover to make sure you survive. So the best thing to do is to move from cover to cover as you're pushing along. So let's say I'm running out to the middle objective from this area right here. I'll first want to run towards this piece of cover right here. Take quick peeks to make sure no enemies are around. If there's an enemy in this window, for example, you can either crouch or prone to hide, or you can run over here as quickly as possible to get cover behind these pillars. But if the area is safe, you can move forward to behind this truck to get a better angle on this alleyway to take an enemy out, or you can crouch around to get an angle on an enemy and catch them off guard as they're peeking this angle. Now once that's all said and done, you can move forward, push this objective, just take quick peeks in and out behind this crate, move over to the other side, take a couple quick more peeks. And this is the area I like to sit most of the time if I'm spawning on this side of the map. But obviously you could also use this area as cover. You can use behind this truck as cover, either of these blocks. If you want to push forward a little more, you can sit right here to get good cover and catch people off guard if they're pushing this side. And you can move forward and sit on top of these tires to get quick peeks over here or inside of the bus even. Now obviously this is going to be pretty situational depending on what's going on. You could be sitting right here, and unknowingly there's a few enemies sitting in these rooms right here, and they can take you out pretty quickly. So it's important to check your angles and corners as much as possible. So if you're sitting right here, before you move out, check your minimap, check the windows, and make sure nobody's there before you push up. Now, apart from using cover as much as possible, you gotta think of good head glitches to use. Apart from this area being a good piece of cover, it's also a pretty good head glitch if people are sitting in the bus or below the bus. So if you're standing in this corner, the top of your chest and your head will only be exposed, and it's gonna be a lot harder for enemies to get shots off on you when you're sitting here. And the same thing with these little crates right here. Let's say you're waiting for someone to come up these stairs or pop out of that little room around the corner. You have a pretty good head glitch to catch people off guard and take them out as quick as possible without giving them the chance to take you out. Now obviously if you were to use this position, it'd be important to make sure nobody's coming from this way. You can either smoke it off, or you can use your deployable cover to duck out of an enemy's sights if they catch you off guard from the side. One thing you need to remember when head glitching is the hide over bore mechanic, which just means that the bullets come out of the barrel of your gun instead of your head like they do in some other FPS games. So let's say I want to use this head glitch right here to take out enemies coming out from this courtyard or from this alleyway right here. You'll have a pretty easy time taking them out without the hide over bore mechanic getting in the way. But if someone were to catch you off guard and they come out through this little room right here, you're not going to be able to take them out because your bullets are going to hit the bottom of the wall. So that's just something to keep in mind. And before we finish this video off, there's a few tips that are incredibly helpful for you and your whole team. First, make sure you're charging your defibs before reviving teammates. I know it can be hard to get a full charge off depending on the situation, but when you charge your defib, you're going to give your down teammates full health when they're revived. And also, make sure you can successfully revive your teammates. One of the most annoying things is when I'm downed and a teammate comes flying in and taps me with a defib while an enemy is still staring me down. This just gives the enemy an extra kill and leaves you with one less person to capture or defend the objective. When you go in for a revive, make sure you smoke off a downed player, take a bit of time to clear out the area to make sure there aren't any enemies around, or even use your deployable cover to get the revive if you can get away with it. Also, make sure you use your ping as much as possible. When you ping an enemy, you're spotting them for your whole team in world and on the minimap, which will give you and your team the chance to take that enemy or vehicle out in quick succession. And one of the most important tips is that you need to burst fire at range. If you're going full auto on enemies at range and you're wondering why none of your shots are hitting, it's because the bullet spread of your weapon is throwing your bullets all over the place. When you're encountering longer range gunfights, you'll want to shoot in short bursts so that your shots are as accurate as possible. If you have trouble bursting, you can always practice on the dummies in the firing range or with the bots in casual breakthrough. But that's going to be it for the video. If you're still having trouble figuring out how to implement all of this into your gameplay, spend some time watching people play the game live to see how they implement these tactics into their gameplay. And speaking of playing live, I stream the game multiple times a week right here on this channel, so come stop by. I also have a Discord that has all the builds for the weapons that I like to use, like the M433, the M277, and the M2010 ESR. If this guide helped you, be sure to drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next deep dive, and leave a comment if there was anything I missed. Besides that, I'll see you in the next video.